Amazing discovery, Millionaire follows his maid after work and uncovers hidden transformation. Thomas Reynolds leaned against the floor-to-ceiling glass of his opulent suburban home, the wind-swirling autumn leaves outside, a reflection of the turmoil inside him. Meetings drained him, filled with shallow conversations masquerading as strategy. He had built a tech empire, yet here he was, shackled by expectations to maintain a facade of success. The pressure weighed down like lead. He had wealth, influence, a beautiful family, but daily, an emptiness gnawed at him beneath the surface, an aching void that grew deeper despite the luxurious life he lived. As he passed through the foyer, he noticed Anna, their maid, humming to herself while she cleaned the kitchen. Her laughter held a lightness he hadn't felt in ages, a warmth, and he felt an odd pull toward her. He often marveled at her spirit. She carried her struggles with a grace that made him question everything he valued. Burns of shame flickered. How could he be envious of the joy she radiated? He pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on his evening plans of a charity gala filled with the same relentless small talk. That night, however, his curiosity got the better of him, igniting a spark that had long been dimmed. After closing the door behind him, he followed Anna down the quiet streets of their affluent neighborhood into the heart of the city. The rhythm of her stride captivated him, her focus, her mission. What would lead her out here instead of home? The answer struck him unexpectedly as he arrived at a theater. Inside, he was swept away. The pulse of the crowd echoed the vibrant life he had never dared to step into. And there stood Anna, graceful, powerful as she danced on stage, her sparkling costume glimmering in the soft lights. Thomas found himself rooted to the spot, the music pulsing through him, his own heart hammering in disbelief. He had never seen this side of her so alive, so free. The way she commanded the stage was a revelation. The audience, young girls wide-eyed with admiration, clung to her every move, and he felt a swelling emotion, pride mingled with heartache. This was a stark contrast to his sterile existence marinated in social obligations and high-dollar transactions. Dim lights shrouded his world from the raw beauty displayed before him, forcing him to confront the sacrifices he had made for an illusion of success, but then doubt settled in, crawling into his mind. He couldn't support her dreams without risking his reputation. The thought of judgment from his world, a world that would look disdainfully upon his admiration for someone from a different walk of life, paralyzed him. What would his affluent friends say? The pressure to conform choked him, and with every joyful twirl Anna made on stage, his own fears were laid bare. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. His internal conflict spiraled further when he unexpectedly bumped into a business associate, an old acquaintance who would never spare a moment before snubbing someone deemed lower in status. "Nice to see you mingling with the help, Thomas," the man sneered, an all-too-familiar smirk creasing his face. A wave of humiliation surged through him, an urge to defend Anna thundered in his chest, but he hesitated. Would speaking up cost him everything? The shame weighed heavily, a relentless tide threatening to drown him in the very privilege he clung to. With the night closing, and the music fading, Thomas stood paralyzed, facing the storm within that seemed to mirror the one outside, sparks of realization igniting questions he had long buried. Did he dare reach out to help Anna achieve her dreams? Did he dare not to? As the curtain fell, his heart raced with determination mixed with anguish, teetering on the edge of an impossible decision. What future lay before them, tangled in hope and fear, waiting to be unspooled? A sense of urgency gripped Thomas as he stepped out of the theater, the world around him dissolving into a swirl of uncertainty and fear. The rich cacophony of laughter from the gala felt worlds away, a stark contrast to his bubbling tumult. He barely registered the threads of reality. Thoughts of Anna's brightness dazzled him, yet doubt wove darker patterns through his mind that he walked aimlessly, still replaying Anna's performance, the grace that defied the narrative he'd built around her. She was more than a maid, she was a luminary illuminating his shadowed existence. A wave of guilt crashed over him. How could he consider abandoning her pursuit for the comfort of his status quo? The encounter with his associate echoed in his head, a reminder of the chains that bound him. It was one thing to admire her from afar, but quite another to step into her world, a world that risked breaking the carefully built framework of his life. His thoughts flitted from one possibility to another as he returned home, closing the door behind him with a heavy heart. He sank into the plush couch, the engulfing cushions doing little to ease the tightness in his chest. The silence of the opulent living room felt alien. This comforting space loomed stark against the vibrant vibrancy of the theater. He couldn't inhabit it anymore without the nagging realization of what he'd lost. That night wrapped around him, full of sleepless minutes, punctuated by flashes of Anna's artistry. In the waning hours, it struck him the revelation that while he had turned his back on his passions to appease societal expectations, she had clung fiercely to hers. Something within him simmered, coiling tighter with each tick of the clock. Why should she be sacrificed for his fears? Determination flickered, an ember in the ash of his conflict. Morning arrived with a cold clarity, sunlight filtering through the glass. Thomas felt bolstered by a new resolve. Today, he would confront the facade that had ensnared him for too long. He had spent years building a fortress with walls of respectability, but it was time to challenge that very foundation. He needed to meet Anna again, to understand her deeper, to open up a dialogue both rich and bold. That yearning to support her dreams sparked a blueprint for his new mission, one that demanded courage. He slipped into a tailored suit, the fabric familiar against his skin. Each movement felt like a surrender to new beginnings, a shedding of self-imposed limitations. He decided first to visit the local dance studio where he learned Anna spent her mornings rehearsing. As he navigated through the streets, each passing block infused him with a sense of liberation. The fear of judgment loomed, but the weight felt lighter today, an indication that he was becoming ready to redefine his own narrative alongside hers. Upon arrival, he inhaled deeply before entering the studio. The dimmed interior buzzed with energy. A lesson was in full swing, the rhythmic sound of music merging with laughter. Thomas hesitated, just inside the doorway, his heart racing at the thought of being on the fringes of this vibrant world he longed to join. Spotting Anna as she led a group of young girls through their routine, his breath hitched. She was all-consuming, commanding the room with joy. Boldness surged within him. He stepped forward, not as the millionaire masking insecurity but as a man on the cusp of self-discovery. Just as he approached, however, the door swung open behind him, and in walked a horde of familiar faces, friends from the gala, laughter echoing in the air. "Thomas! There you are!" One called, the jovial tone abruptly chilling him as they zeroed in on him. Their gazes skimmed over Anna, judging, and he felt the familiar waves of anxiety creep back. In that moment, he stood at a crossroads, the weight of conformity clashing violently with the whispers of hope. What would he choose? As their voices boomed, a question clawed at the back of his mind. Would he allow their expectations to dictate his path, or would he embrace the life waiting for him alongside? Anna? He inhaled, feeling every heartbeat as it pulsed through him, resolving to finally make a stand. The shadows of his old life darkened his vision, but amid them glimmered the brilliance of possibility. It was time to claim his own. As he turned to face his friends with conviction, he knew one thing: this confrontation would reshape everything. Would it shatter the bonds he had with his affluent world, or could it pave a new way forward? The answer unraveled in the anticipation of his next words as he prepared to confront those who had dictated his existence for too long. The laughter of his friends washed over him, a tide of familiarity mixed with impending dread. Thomas felt an urge to retreat, to slip back into the shadows where their expectations could no longer reach him. But as Anna's radiant figure flickered in his mind, the warmth of her spirit contrasted sharply against the cold reality of his current existence. His gut twisted, a dissonance reverberating through him, compelling him to rise above. "Thomas! One of his friends, Mark, nudged him playfully. "We've been looking for you. Come join us." Thomas could feel the smirks of the others, their eyes appraising him not as a man of integrity but as a pawn to be maneuvered around their social chessboard. It was a role he had played all too well, but not today. He squared his shoulders, drawing in a breath filled with determination. "Actually, I'm here to support someone else," he declared, directing his gaze steadily toward Anna, who had now turned her attention to the group, her warmth dimmed by their encroaching presence. She was no longer just an afterthought but the reason for his newfound resolve. "Support?" Mark scoffed, laughter rippling through the others. "You mean you're here to play the role of the patron? What's next? An impromptu donation?" The mockery stung, and Thomas could feel the crimson flush spreading across the back of his neck. But that pain only ignited the ember of resolve that simmered within him. "I'm here to learn from her," Thomas replied, each word carefully weighed but laced with newfound conviction. He felt a small thrill rush through him, the words shifting something within the group. Anna's brown eyes widened, disbelief mingling with delight. For a fleeting moment, her smile ignited the room, and Thomas felt a flicker of hope. But that was quickly quelled when Mark's laughter devolved into derision. "Learn? From a dancer?" The scoffing only grew louder, echoes of mockery joining the overwhelming energy thrumming in the studio. But to Thomas, their voices morphed into mere background noise overshadowed by Anna's presence. With another deep breath, he forced himself to take a step towards her. Shouldering the pressure of their glances, he continued. "She has something to teach us all. More than any of us would dare admit." For a moment, silence met his words, and those around him weighed the impact of his claim. The laughter dissolved, replaced by glances traded between his friends, uncertainty creeping over their faces. But even in this moment of vulnerability, Thomas felt the unease fade, empowering him. Each heartbeat fueled his desire to bridge the chasm between his affluent world and the vibrant life that Anna represented. Isn't it bold to challenge the status quo? He reflected internally, recalling the artistic freedom common among those in Anna's world, the very freedom he had sacrificed for appearances. The realization was shocking: he could define his own path, separate from the construct he had been confined within. He sensed the shifting dynamic around him. While they still stood skeptical, a small measure of respect began to infiltrate their mockery. With cautious optimism, he met Anna's gaze, her expression one of encouragement mingled with astonishment. "Thomas," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, so charged with emotion that it cut through the tension. But he held up a hand, even as those behind him began to murmur, concern shadowing their words. "Just give me a moment." His heart raced, a parade of uncertainties dancing in his thoughts. His next words could either solidify his transformation or shatter it entirely. It was time to unveil a hidden truth not just for Anna, but for himself. The thought of finally confronting the fear of judgment and finding in them a path toward authenticity felt like a rebirth. There's more to life than the pressure to conform, and Anna knows that. "I know that now." The murmurs intensified, but the seeds of change had been sown. Yet, he understood that this confrontation could not simply be a deflection of his past life. He needed to uproot those expectations, even if it risked severing ties with the very identity he'd spent years cultivating. Suddenly, an echo of applause broke through, not from the group of friends, but from a small contingent of students who had paused their practice to witness the exchange. They regarded him with newfound admiration, and for the first time, their innocence shed light on possibilities he had forgotten he desired. "Let us see what you've got, then," one of the younger dancers called out, inviting him into the ring of camaraderie that Anna had fostered. The challenge hung in the air like the scent of rain before a storm. Feeling the weight of his decision anchoring him, Thomas's pulse quickened. This was not just a dance, this was the embodiment of his stance against complacency and a step toward embracing his true self. He understood with clarity now that were he to transform, he must be willing to dance into the very heart of his fears. As Anna and the younger dancers beckoned him closer, he felt the burning question pulse through his mind: was he prepared to reveal the depth of his capabilities, or would he recoil back into the safe cocoon of his privilege? The urgency of his next move surged through him, a tidal wave of potential waiting to crest. Thomas took a deep breath, ready to embrace his next leap. Would he find the rhythm to join them, or would he falter, retreating into the shadows of doubt yet again? The moment hung suspended, electric and charged with the promise of transformation. Thomas stepped into the circle of dancers, his heart thumping as the challenge echoed in his ears. The laughter of his friends faded into a murmur, a distant memory that now seemed trivial compared to the weight of the moment. In this ring of youth and expressive freedom, he felt like an imposter. Yet, denial birthed a revolutionary urge within him, the urge to shatter the expectations that had long shackled him. As he stood still, a dozen pairs of eyes focused on him, curiosity mixed with excitement. Thomas wrestled with a whirlwind of insecurities. What if he stumbled? What if his inherited elegance faltered in the face of true artistry? He was acutely aware that every second stretched, with each passing moment heightening the insistence to either leap or retreat. "What do you have, Thomas?" Anna's voice cut through the air, light and enigmatic, her features illuminated by the warm-colored lights of the studio. It was an invitation wrapped in challenge, beckoning him to uncover that which he had kept hidden even from himself. With a gulp, he forced himself to stand taller, mentally shaking off the suffocating cloak of privilege. Inside, a fierce voice prompted him: "This is your moment. Dance like no one expects anything from you." As he rose to meet her gaze, he felt a flicker of something long buried, a forgotten sparkle of joy and genuine desire. He hesitated. This dance was not merely about skill, it was an unmasking. A showcasing of the man he had hidden for far too long. The crowd was small but vibrant, their energy palpable, and Thomas had a notion that they saw him not as the millionaire of family status but as a soul attempting to emerge from the cocoon of conformity. He closed his eyes for a fleeting moment, inviting the rhythm to surface from within him. Music swelled and ignited his spirit, an inner symphony giving life to movements that were yet to breathe. Then, with a deep breath, Thomas took a step forward, allowing the beat to lead him rather than apologizing for his presence. He let the music take control. No longer was he performing for the superficial cheers of friends adorned in privilege. Instead, he moved for himself, revealing the long-suppressed layers of vulnerability, joy, and freedom. His feet found their stride, and as he began to twirl with a sense of liberation, the laughter from earlier morphed into astonished gasps. The shift was palpable. They saw him, finally, as he saw himself. With every turn, Thomas uncovered fragments of his own hidden capabilities. A new rhythm, one he hadn't felt in years, fluttered through him. Memories of childhood dance classes flooded back, a time before responsibility and wealth had dulled his spirit. He remembered the joy of movement, the laughter of friends then untainted by judgment, and discovered that within him lay an artist yearning to escape. With growing momentum, he engaged those around him in a playful manner, a spark of camaraderie igniting as he incorporated their smiles into his dance. Spinning and leaping alongside Anna and the other dancers felt thrilling, liberating. It was a shared moment of vulnerability, pure and unspoiled by pretense or expectation. This connection burgeoned into a tide of exhilaration, fueling his every movement, but as Thomas spun out the final flourish, exhilaration collided with doubt. Would his friends still see him as the polished prodigy, or had he crossed an invisible line? He landed, breathless and exhilarated, glancing back toward the group that had gathered. Becker's smirk was replaced by a furrowed brow, while Mark's laughter had evaporated into a stunned silence. Anna stepped forward, her applause ringing like crystal chimes in the dimming light. "You found your rhythm, Thomas. That was beautiful." The authenticity of her praise felt like a rich, warm blanket embraced by the winter air surrounding him. But the reality of confrontation loomed as he faced Mark's eyes, which were now narrowed in suspicion. "So, is this your big reveal? Are you ready to leave behind your opulent life for this?" The irritation in Mark's voice echoed slightly, buzzing like a lit fuse. An electrical current of tension pulsed through Thomas, his moment of triumph sputtered against the unyielding wall of skepticism. The fear of judgment that had paralyzed him before now spiraled back, a gut-twisting reminder that transformation came not without costs, that he stood at a crossroads, the thrill of victory mingled with the uncertainty of rejection. Would he take the next step, revealing the depths of his desires, or cower back into the shadows he longed to escape? As the silence thickened, Thomas could feel a weighty decision pressing at his core, a defining moment in his evolution yet to unfold. Time to face it, he thought, a flicker of defiance igniting within him. With every beat of his heart, he steeled himself against judgment, ready to voice the truth that could either liberate him or shatter the last remnants of his past. The moment had arrived. Would he embrace the raw authenticity of his new reality, or would he once again shrink back, swallowed by the fears from which he was desperately trying to break free? Thomas felt the weight of Mark's gaze like an anchor, pulling him down into the depths of self-doubt. The air around him thickened with tension, as if the atmosphere itself was waiting for his response. This was no longer just about dance, it was about revealing the man who had hidden beneath layers of expectation, the man he could choose to become or continue to bury under the facade of privilege. Is it that obvious? He finally managed, struggling to articulate the tumultuous emotions roiling within him. He couldn't allow this moment to dissolve into the abyss of his old self, the one who shied away from confrontation and truth. What if it is? Mark's brow furrowed further, a harsh line across his forehead, indicating disbelief, and the crowd shifted uncomfortably. This was the moment that was both horrifying and exhilarating. Would Mark's words pierce the newfound confidence blooming within him? Or would they ignite a fire that led him down a path he never dared to explore? Dance isn't just a pastime, it's about freedom, Thomas pressed on, feeling the truth resonate through him. If anything, this is me breaking free from the sketch of who I was molded to be. Each word carried the weight of his aspiration, a desire to transcend past expectations. Anna's expression was encouraging, brightening the dark space created by Mark's skepticism. She had recognized him in that moment, the rawness he was beginning to embrace, and he clung to her approval. The competitive atmosphere dulled in her presence, an oasis for his burgeoning self-discovery. What about your family? What would they think? Mark shot back, his tone laced with resentment and a hint of concern that felt too familiar. The underlying message was clear: could Thomas genuinely risk losing the very aspects of his life that defined him? A pulse of determination surged through Thomas as he weighed his words carefully. His relationships had always been built on a foundation of wealth and expectations, and perhaps this exploration of dance was merely the beginning. It offered more than movement, it provided a sense of agency. Honestly, a part of me is terrified of the answer, he admitted, eyes steady on Mark. But I know I cannot let fear dictate my life any longer. With those words, he took a step back into the circle, inviting anyone willing to join. The audience, previously steeped in disbelief, was caught off guard by his vulnerability, but beneath it simmered an energy of mutual interest. Thomas remembered the joy that dancing had once brought him and how far he distanced himself from it. He breathed again, louder this time. I've struggled with feelings of inadequacy, and maybe this dance is my response to step into my own skin, to embrace the artist within me. The collective breath of the spectators drew in while the rhythmic pulse of the music ignited once more. He swayed, embodying each word he had just uttered. The rhythm called for him to let it all go. He danced, not for praise or performance, but for understanding. The steps were unrefined at first, awkward, challenging, but slowly they morphed into a language all their own, each gesture a testament to his acceptance of his journey. But this act of defiance was not without consequence. As he spun through the rhythms, Thomas realized the risk was far beyond judgment. He had put his legacy on the line. Could he relinquish the safety of wealth, of status, to chase the pulse of creativity? A gasp from the gathering reaffirmed his uncertainty, and yet, for the first time, the anxiety faded into exhilaration. Then, amidst the beats maximizing his resolve, he caught sight of himself in a mirror across the room. The sweaty, disheveled young man reflected back was strikingly different from the polished image he was accustomed to seeing. In that moment, he recognized possibility, a resilience that countered his fears and began to erode the walls he had built up around his identity. but just as he began to lose himself in the music, Mark's voice cut through the air once more, sharp like glass. "Is this really what you want? Maybe. All this is just a cry for help hiding behind a smile?" The words sliced straight through his reverie. An uncanny realization crystallized in Thomas's mind. The very thing he longed for, a true sense of self, was now tangled in considerations of others. With every note vibrating through him, Thomas faced the deeper truth. It was time to reflect not only on what he wanted but who he truly was beneath the layers that had defined him for years. As he moved, he couldn't shake the notion that the next step must be even bolder. Would he confront Mark, challenging very foundations of their friendship? Or would this lead to an uncharted territory of self-sabotage he had long avoided? With the bittersweet taste of uncertainty in his mouth and the pulse of dance coursing through his veins, he prepared himself for the inevitable confrontation, aware that any resolution might just shatter everything he thought he understood. The upcoming moments promised to either solidify his transformation or accompany him into the lingering shadows of his past. The music pulsed around Thomas, and he felt the familiar heartbeat of rhythm seep into his limbs. Each step became a defiance against the roles imposed upon him: son, heir, success machine. As he navigated the floor, he began to separate himself from the weight of Mark's judgment. The mirrors reflected not just his movements, but a man on the cusp of becoming. Thomas pivoted sharply, facing Mark again. They locked eyes, and the world around him faded. The chatter of the audience, the rhythm of the music, evaporated until only the two of them remained. Each heartbeat echoed the unspoken tension, a physical manifestation of his internal struggle. "Is it wrong to want something different?" he challenged, his voice unwavering. He wasn't just fighting for a place in the dance, he was fighting for the right to define himself. Mark was taken aback, the surprise breaking through his tough facade. "It's not about right or wrong. You have a legacy to protect." His rebuttal was heavy, steeped in an authority crafted by years of privilege. But Thomas understood now: protection was a facade draped over fear. "Is it a legacy if it's built on someone else's dreams?" Thomas pressed. "Don't you see? What I want is not contrary to who I am, it's a part of me that has been suffocated." He instinctively dug deeper, probing at the cracks in Mark's certainty. Suddenly, the dance floor transformed into a battlefield, their movements sharp and deliberate. Every time Thomas moved, he aimed to reclaim a piece of himself. He saw not just the dance, but a life where creativity thrived over tradition. For Mark, this was unfamiliar terrain, the challenge of the unaccustomed. "You think you can just waltz away from everything? This isn't just about you." He shot back, anger flickering in his eyes, prompting a swell of defiance within Thomas. "Why not?" Thomas shouted, the words bursting forth like the rhythm of the song that now surrounded them. "Why can't I take up space? Why can't I choose my own path? This dance is catharsis, it's a choice to embrace authenticity." The eyes of the audience flitted back and forth, their intrigue shifting into what felt like a judgment against Mark. He was trapped in a system of his own creation, and Thomas suddenly realized that he had been just as ensnared. In that charged moment, Thomas felt the dance elevate from mere movement to emotional liberation. He continued to twirl and leap, incorporating every sentiment he had quenched. No more pretense, each motion was a claim to his identity. "What is it, Thomas? Can you truly abandon your legacy?" Mark asked, his tone softer, a hint of vulnerability creeping in. For a brief moment, Thomas's determination wavered. The enormity of his implications loomed large: family expectations, societal status, those were shields he had clung to for so long. Would shedding them reveal a luminous truth or expose a gaping void? "I can't say I'm ready to abandon it. But I can't keep pretending it fits me," he confessed. The confession fell between them like a soft whisper, laden with the weight of realization. "I need to carve out new space, not just to exist, but to live, to feel alive." In that exchange, a subtle shift transpired. Mark's defenses lowered as Thomas watched doubt flicker across his friend's expression. Could he, too, dare to redefine himself beyond the shadows of expectation? Thomas was suddenly aware of a liberation unfurling within him, a sense of clarity akin to the moment after the storm. He understood now that true identity does not conform to the world's demands. This was his transformation, guided by his own desires. Yet, the moment was rife with tension as he planned his next words, with Mark and the spectating audience more vulnerable than ever. Would he compel Mark to pivot alongside him, or would this denote a brewing fracture in their friendship, one that could haunt them both? As the music swelled around them, he drew a breath deep enough to sustain his courage. Mark, all I want is a choice. The question is whether you can accept that. The stare that lasted only seconds felt like eternity, and as he awaited Mark's response, Thomas realized that the outcome could redefine not just their friendship, but the essence of who he was becoming. What would Mark choose? Would he step into the light of acceptance, or cling to the shadows of expectation? The electric buzz in the air felt palpable, a living entity feeding off the tension between Thomas and Mark. As silence enveloped them, the lingering uncertainty pushed Thomas to reflect deeply on the stakes. In that suspended moment, doubt cascaded through him, yet a fierce determination brewed beneath it. How had he become an actor in a play he never chose? He thought of the rehearsed lines and the expected movements that had dictated his life. But now, amid the dance of shadows and light, he felt a rebellious thrill tighten his core, a visceral recognition of his right to write his own script. Thomas, Mark finally said, his voice low but firm. Are you truly prepared to let everything go? The family name, the wealth, you'll have to start from scratch. The words invited temptation, a siren's call to retreat into the warmth of known comforts. A flicker of fear ignited in Thomas's chest, fighting against the clarity he had found. Could he abandon the solid foundation of privilege and security? But then, memories of stifled dreams rushed forward. His passion for dance was not a whim but an urgent heartbeat he could not ignore. If he carefully peeled away all the layers society had piled on him, who would remain? The thought churned within, daring him to imagine a life only his own, not a legacy to sustain but a future to create. Every day I live as someone else's idea of success makes me more lost, Thomas asserted, his voice steadying. Yes, I could stay in this gilded cage, or I could leap into an unknown that could lead to something extraordinary. Mark's brow furrowed, the uncertainty etched deeper as he grappled with this revelation. You say that now, but your choice could rip apart everything around you. Are you ready to handle that pain? Pain. It flared like a warning light, and for a moment, its familiar grasp threatened to pull him back into old habits. But accompanying the fear was something else, a burgeoning sense of freedom. He imagined diving into the unknown, his heart racing with anticipation. It was the energy of creation, a new fabric upon which he could weave his identity. I can confront that pain, Thomas offered, his voice firmer now. If it means discovering who I am beneath all those layers. This determination was a decision crystallized in authenticity, sparking a flame that rivaled the dance itself. Returning to the rhythm, he felt every beat resonating with the truth he was proclaiming. Each move reinforced his message, that he could not only dance but reclaim ownership of his life. The joints of his body loosened, each pirouette drawing him closer to a version of himself he had only lost in fragments. As the music slowed, an ache began to settle within him, not of loss, but of acceptance. It felt as though he was closing a chapter while simultaneously preparing for the next one. Could there be space in this life for both authenticity and love? Mark, if you can't accept my journey, I won't fight you, he said. But I won't stand down either. There was weight in those words, a promise of tenacity wrapped in vulnerability. That he could see the wheels turning in Mark's mind, a storm of emotions clouding his eyes. The dance floor narrowed, reducing their world to the raw essence of friendship spilling over with defining choices. Thomas longed for a companion to traverse this uncharted path alongside him, but could Mark relinquish the reins of tradition and embrace the messy beauty of transformation? in that moment, the answer hung delicately between them, much like a dancer poised on the edge of a leap. Mark stepped closer, uncertainty shadowing his movement, as if he was about to intertwine their futures in a brand new way or perhaps sever their connection altogether. The echo of their complex entanglement loomed large, and Thomas braced himself. No matter what decision was made, he understood that this was his moment of truth, both exhilarating and terrifying. How far was he willing to go in search of authenticity? Would Mark's choice become a bridge or a barricade? As the music faded and the tension thrummed, the question remained suspended in the air between them, inviting a confrontation that would change everything. Would they emerge united in a shared vision or fractured, leading Thomas down a path he could never return from? The space around them thickened, alive with uncertainty and potential. The air felt charged, every breath bordering on electric. Thomas watched as Mark's ponderous expression shifted between contemplation and restraint. The gravity of the moment weighed heavily, forcing Thomas to consider every possibility, every consequence of his imminent choices. Mark lowered his gaze, the silence morphing into a profound tension that threatened to consume them both. "You understand the implications of this journey, don't you?" he finally asked, the steadiness of his tone masking a tempest of emotion beneath. "It's not just about you anymore. Your decisions impact those around you, me included." Thomas clenched his fists, the heat of his frustration rising like a tide. Mark's words were buried beneath waves of familial obligation, the very chains he was yearning to break free from. How could he convey the depths of his hidden dreams without sounding selfish? Yet, selfishness seemed like a necessary sacrifice if he ever hoped to awaken his true self. "Mark, this isn't about abandoning you or our legacy," he replied, softness creeping into his voice. "It's about me finding my own truth. Isn't that what life is meant to be? An exploration of who we genuinely are?" Something flickered behind Mark's eyes, a flash of understanding, but it quickly dimmed. "And if that truth isn't enough? What if you discover you can't dance?" There was a raw vulnerability in that question. It pricked at Thomas's newfound determination, suggesting that even the possibility of failure merited consideration. What if the leap led him into an abyss instead of the beautifully crafted dreams he envisioned? Yet, failure was no longer a weight he feared. It was a part of the risk he was willing to embrace. A truth buried among heaped expectations was more frightful than falling short of success. He was ready to face even the most uncomfortable realities, if only to clear a path towards authenticity. "I'm tired of living in the shadow of your doubts," Thomas said, infusing his words with unyielding conviction. "Let me find out what I'm capable of without the burden of fear." In that moment, Thomas allowed his thoughts to drift momentarily beyond Mark, to the time he spent dancing alone in his room, lost only in the music. That private world had felt so limitless, an expanse that held his fears and ambitions. He could either retreat into safety, never testing his mettle, or embark on a dizzying journey where potential awaited beyond reach. An idea struck him with fervor, one that felt like ignition. He decided to take the first steps beyond hesitation, not for validation but for exploration. He could harness his fears and allow them to guide him, rather than bind him. Looking back at Mark, he knew this conversation was a critical one in their history, perhaps even their friendship. "I want to take that leap, whatever it entails," he breathed. "But I need you to be with me, not as the person holding me back, but as someone willing to explore the unknown side by side." Mark took a deep breath, eyes widening slightly, perhaps realizing he was standing at the precipice of a decision that could alter the course of their lives. The resolve in Thomas stirred something poignant within him, a resolve that beckoned him to reconsider his own loyalty to tradition. "Are you ready for what could come next?" Mark asked softly, a hint of vulnerability creeping back into his contemplation, as if he too stood on the edge of a leap of faith. Thomas nodded, meeting Mark's eyes. Here lay the crux of their friendship. Could it withstand the strain of change? Could they emerge as stronger souls on this unpredictable journey? Inching closer, Thomas extended his hand, not merely seeking reconciliation but offering Mark a chance to join him in breaking the chains. Would Mark take it? As he felt the moment stretch, anticipation stirred within him, igniting the passion to chase his truth. But the outcome was still cloaked in uncertainty. Mark hesitated, and as silence draped over them once more, the question loomed: would their paths intertwine in a new journey, or would Thomas be cast adrift into the unknown alone? As the silence thickened between them, Thomas felt the weight of expectation compress him, an unseen force pulling at both his ambition and his vulnerability. His extended hand, suspended in the air like a bridge between worlds, was filled with a desperate hope that Mark would step forward. However, that hope teetered dangerously close to doubt, the specter of rejection lurking just beyond his reach. Mark's eyes flicked from Thomas's hand to his face, grappling with the internal battle of loyalty versus the call to adventure. In that moment, Thomas saw not just his friend but the reflection of his own struggle. The duality of longing for freedom and the anxiety of potential betrayal hung over him like a storm cloud. "Step into that unknown and we both could lose something," Mark said finally, his voice now imbued with deeper contemplation. "What if we can't go back? Maybe the past isn't where we need to be headed." Thomas's heart raced at his own daring. With every passing second, he understood that the past held him prisoner to expectations he never agreed to carry. He needed to shatter that illusion, but would Mark choose to join him as an ally rather than an obstacle? Mark hesitated, gnawing at his lower lip. The doubt in his eyes felt like an anchor, but Thomas refused to let it weigh him down. "Life is about progression, finding who we are outside the identities others impose upon us," he implored, desperate for resonance. Mark exhaled slowly, his brow furrowing. Thomas wondered if he recognized the opportunity before them, the chance to embark on a path toward authenticity. That desire to break free pulsed through his veins, igniting determination within him like a flickering flame against the encroaching dark. "I can't promise I won't doubt you, or what this journey entails," Mark finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper but threading through the tension in the air like a lifeline. "But I'll try. I'll try to explore it with you." In that instant, the words felt like a key turning in a lock. Thomas felt a flood of relief intermixed with a renewed sense of urgency. They stood at the threshold. "That's all I ask," he said, his tone softening. "Let us discover our truths together, whatever they may be." As they clasped hands, a spark of understanding flickered back to life within Thomas. The bounds of their friendship were shifting. He felt stretched and expanded in ways he hadn't anticipated. For the first time, he felt the exhilarating pull of potential enveloping him, a sign that he was aligning with the journey toward his authentic self. A thought struck him as he pondered the dance metaphor that had always haunted him. Could he truly learn to dance, allowing the rhythm to move him without the weight of others' expectations? The very essence of his dreams hinged on the belief that he could shape the future he craved, but that revelation came with a daunting realization. Dancing meant letting go of control, embracing the chaos of creativity, trusting both himself and the ground beneath him. What if he stumbled and fell heart-first into an unscripted reality? The exhilaration mixed with fear washed over him, but he resolved not to swallow it back. "Let us start fresh," Thomas suggested, sensing Mark's hesitance morphing into reluctant acceptance. "We can explore small steps, find a class or something." His enthusiasm now aimed at tangible action. He pivoted in his mind toward the possibilities before them. "Classes? Dance classes?" Mark smirked, disbelief threaded through his humor. "Why not? It could be the beginning of understanding ourselves all over again." The playful banter momentarily eased the gravity of their conversation. Yet within Thomas lay an undercurrent of serious commitment, a commitment to defy the whisperings of self-doubt that had echoed so long in his mind. As they began to weave away from the edge of uncertainty, the world beyond beckoned. "Are you ready for the first step?" Thomas felt the impending thrill pulse through him, as if the very air held possibilities yet unmapped, waiting for them at the next crossroads. The longing for discovery surged through him. The contours of their relationship were about to be reshaped with every hesitant step they took, but Thomas couldn't shake the nagging doubt that loomed like a shadow ahead. The dance of authenticity was just beginning. Would stepping out into the world lead them both toward transformation, or would the effort expose deeper fissures threatening their friendship? As the evening shadows deepened around them, one question loomed larger than the others: would they seize this chance, this palpable spark of possibility, or would fear entrap them once again? Thomas Reynolds stood at the threshold of self-discovery, fully aware that the moment he had long awaited was at hand. No longer entrapped in the gilded cage of his past, he was ready to reclaim ownership of the identity he had neglected for far too long. In the dance studio, he felt a spirit of fierce determination pulsating within him, urging him to step boldly into the light of his potential. Weeks had passed since that fateful night, and the distance between Thomas's old self and his transformed spirit could not have been more pronounced. His commitment to explore dance as an art form had yielded newfound joy, establishing a routine that blended practice with passion. As he ventured into the rhythm of his own aspirations, he discovered the latent creativity that had long been dormant, breathing life into his world. Each dance class, and there had been many, became a sanctuary for connection and exploration. He found himself surrounded by a vibrant community, where judgment faded and encouragement flowed. Thomas reveled in his progress, his movements conveying not just talent but an expression of freedom. The judgmental whispers of his past began to dissolve, diminishing in the face of the authenticity he projected. On this particular Tuesday evening, Thomas stood before the mirror, surveying his reflection, and for the first time in years, he recognized a man shaped not by others' expectations but by his own choices, a revelation that filled him with deep satisfaction. Today was special, marking his first solo performance alongside Anna in a community showcase. The anticipation surged within him, a blend of exhilaration and purpose that resonated with every beat of his heart. That he recalled how his journey had evolved. Initially, the fear of inadequacy had thwarted his progress, the insecurities that had once shackled him seeped through every movement. But now, as he prepared to take the stage, he understood the power that flowed from vulnerability. It allowed a connection to both his audience and, more importantly, himself. As the stage lights illuminated his figure, Thomas felt a solid confidence replace the familiar trepidation. Anna, radiant and supportive, stood nearby, her eyes alight with encouragement and belief. She had become a partner not merely in dance but in life, someone who had inspired him to redefine what achievement truly meant. Their rehearsals had become a labor of joy, interspersed with laughter, passion, and a shared commitment to pursue their dreams. The music began, a pulsating beat that coursed through the studio. As Thomas moved, he felt not just the movements but the story woven into every step. This dance was more than just an expression, it was a testimony to his growth, his metamorphosis from the man who hid in shadows to one illuminated by authenticity. He spun and leapt, embracing every note as his body orchestrated a beautiful narrative, combining self-discovery and connection. With every pirouette, he embodied the journey he had taken, each turn pivoting away from fear and towards liberation. With a supportive glance exchanged with Anna, they seamlessly intertwined their movements, showcasing the beauty of collaboration, resilience, and passion. The audience, captivated, witnessed a performance brimming with emotion and authenticity, an overture of triumph against the backdrop of societal expectations. When the final notes of the performance faded, and the crowd erupted in applause, Thomas took a moment to breathe it in. This was more than applause, it was validation of his transformation, an acknowledgement of a journey he had claimed for himself. As he and Anna took a bow, he felt a wave of joy and fulfillment, as though he had not only danced but also traversed a lifetime of growth. His heart swelled with pride, each enthusiastic clap reverberating the affirmation of all he had achieved. Later, surrounded by his supportive friends including Mark, whose hesitance had transformed into admiration, Thomas beamed with fulfillment. "You can't forget that dance isn't about perfection, it's about the connection," he spoke, his words resonating brightly as voices of support enveloped him. Returning to the fabric of his life, Thomas had not only embraced dance but actively defined his existence beyond the shadows of expectations. He felt committed to cultivating a life that honored his aspirations and passions, linking them back to the friends who had weathered the storm alongside him. In that moment, Thomas Reynolds was not merely a millionaire, he was a man who conquered self-doubt and delighted in rediscovering the joy of living. The applause echoed in his mind, a litany of experiences that validated his journey. He stood solid in his confidence, no longer a prisoner to societal demands. Instead, He was a respected artist, an example of genuine growth. This transformation was not ephemeral but a continual process, one that would evolve as he danced through life, step by step, heart unburdened, and spirit illuminated. You need to subscribe now to this channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show appreciation for these transformative tales. Comment with your reactions and theories about this ending. Your insights are important. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this journey of self-discovery. Together, we can continue embracing the power of personal transformation.